It started with a flicker. The screen buzzed, colors bleeding together like oil on water. Trees, silent and looming, swayed in slow motion as if time itself had fractured. A branch cracked, sharp, close, and the image trembled violently. Then came the breathing, panicked, shallow, rapid, and footsteps, fast, uneven, desperate. The camera jolted downward, hitting the ground with a muffled thud. It continued recording sideways now, capturing muddy boots scrambling across dead leaves, vanishing into the thick underbrush. That was the first few seconds of the footage. No introduction, no explanation, just chaos, raw and real. It wasn't found by police, nor by search and rescue. It wasn't delivered to authorities or the media. It was discovered by accident, by a dog named Max. A rusted GoPro buried under dirt and tangled roots in the middle of the Willow Creek forest. The plastic casing was cracked, its lens fogged over by years of weather and decay, but the memory card inside, it survived. And what it contained would unravel the quiet peace of an entire town. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales that might just change the way you see the world around you. It all began on a mild October afternoon. The Sanders family, Jake, a 38-year-old wildlife photographer, and his daughter Emily, aged 12, had set out on a weekend camping trip. They weren't strangers to the woods. Jake had spent his youth exploring this exact forest, and now he was passing that same love for nature down to his daughter. They had brought their German shepherd, Max, a loyal, excitable companion with a nose that never seemed to rest. They had set up camp near the edge of a forgotten trail, a path that had long since vanished from most maps. Willow Creek wasn't exactly tourist-friendly. Its woods were dense, misty even in daylight, and known among locals for strange legends that no one took seriously, until now. Emily tossed a stick, and Max bolted after it, tail wagging furiously. But instead of returning with the branch, Max stopped dead in his tracks near a large oak. He began to dig, barking intermittently as if something beneath the surface demanded his attention. At first Jake thought it was a rabbit burrow, but the dirt gave way to something hard. Metal. Jake knelt beside Max and brushed away the soil, revealing the rectangular shape of a badly weathered GoPro. It was scratched, dull, and looked like it had been buried for years. A small corner of its waterproof casing remained intact, just enough to protect the memory card lodged inside. "Must have been lost by some hiker," Jake muttered, slipping it into his backpack. They didn't think much of it, not until they got home. After unloading their gear and warming up some leftovers, Jake popped the memory card into his laptop, half out of curiosity, half out of habit. He had recovered trail cameras before. Most were filled with deer, squirrels, and the occasional bear. But this wasn't wildlife footage. The folder was named Daniel Rowe 2020. Inside were 38 video files, each time-stamped, spanning over 4 days. The thumbnails were dim and grainy. Jake clicked on the first one, and just like that, the calm of their Sunday evening shattered. A man's face filled the screen, young, maybe late 20s, wearing a backpack and a wide grin. He stood in the very forest they had just returned from, narrating to the camera with an easy, confident tone. "Day 1, he said. Willow Creek Wilderness. No signal, no distractions, just me, the trees, and silence. Let's see what I find." Jake leaned closer, his brow furrowed. The footage was clearer than expected, despite its age. The man introduced himself as Daniel Rowe, an independent traveler documenting his solo backpacking trip. What began as a peaceful exploration would soon twist into something none of them could explain. And it all started with that dig, that bark. That one moment where curiosity peeled back the surface of the forest, revealing what should have stayed buried. Jake Sanders didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in instincts. The kind that made you stop in your tracks, feel your pulse tighten in your throat, and turn your head toward the unseen. He had spent his adult life trailing wolves through snow, photographing eagles in mid-hunt, capturing the beauty of the natural world with the patient lens of a storyteller. But no landscape had ever unsettled him like the forest outside Willow Creek, not until that GoPro found its way into his life. At 38, Jake had built a quiet, purposeful life. He lived in a modest cabin on the outskirts of town, close enough to the main road, but just far enough for the trees to feel like old friends. His work as a wildlife photographer was freelance, sometimes featured in nature magazines, sometimes sold as prints at the local shop. He wasn't rich, but he had freedom, and that mattered more. His daughter, Emily, had just turned 12. Bright-eyed, fiercely curious, and endlessly talkative, she was the fire in Jake's otherwise calm world. Her mother had passed away when Emily was only 4, an accident, quick and unforgiving. Since then, it had just been the two of them, learning to navigate life's quiet stretches and sudden storms. Emily adored the woods. She said they whispered when the wind blew, and Jake never corrected her. Their weekends were often spent hiking, birdwatching, sometimes just sitting by a river and skipping stones. She called Max her furry brother, and the dog, loyal as any sibling, never left her side. Willow Creek was a small town where everyone knew your name and most of your business. It sat nestled between two ridgelines, wrapped in fog through most of fall and early winter. Locals lived simple lives: loggers, shopkeepers, retirees. There were no cinemas, no malls. The one diner in town, Nellie's, served the same menu it had for 30 years, and no one complained. But even in a place that quiet, stories had a way of lingering, especially about the forest. Some said people went missing, others swore they saw lights that didn't belong to any ranger or hunter. Most dismissed the tales as campfire nonsense. Jake had too, until Max dug up that camera. Back home, after watching the first video of Daniel Rowe, Jake had found himself unsettled, not by what was seen, but by what was felt. There was something in Daniel's eyes, a tension behind the smile, something about the way he looked over his shoulder every few seconds, like he already knew he wasn't alone. Emily had fallen asleep on the couch. Max curled beside her. Jake sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, sifting through the video files. Most were short, some just a minute or two. Daniel talking about his route, pointing out strange rocks or trees, noting changes in temperature. He mentioned landmarks Jake recognized: the broken bridge at Mill Hollow, the old fire watchtower, the twisted oak shaped like a lightning bolt. What stood out was how alone he seemed. No other voices, no background chatter, just Daniel, his breathing, and the low, constant hum of forest silence. Jake paused the video and leaned back. Something inside him stirred. It wasn't just curiosity. It felt like responsibility. Someone had left this trail behind, not just physically, but emotionally. A breadcrumb path made of digital echoes, and Jake, for reasons he couldn't yet name, felt drawn to follow it. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing against the windows like fingers. Max lifted his head, ears twitching, then settled again. Jake saved the video files onto a separate hard drive. He didn't want to lose them, not yet. He didn't know why, but he felt like this wasn't just a curiosity to be solved. It was something else, something that would demand more than questions, something that would change how he saw the woods forever. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a thought lingered, cold and unwelcome. What if Daniel Rowe never left that forest? The next morning, Jake sat with his coffee while Emily chatted over her cereal. Her excitement about the weekend hadn't faded. She talked about the mossy log she found that looked like a dragon's back, and the squirrel Max had chased for half an hour without success. Jake smiled, but his mind remained on the files he'd watched the night before. After Emily left for school, he returned to the kitchen table and opened the folder again. The name on every file was the same: Daniel Rowe 2020. The numbering suggested a chronological order, so Jake clicked on the second video. The screen brightened, revealing Daniel's face once more. This time the camera was mounted to his chest. His voice was clearer, calmer. "Trail's fading," Daniel said, panning around. "Either the map's outdated or I'm already off it, not worried. I brought extra food, and the water filter's working fine. Besides, this is the point: getting lost a little, letting go." Jake recognized the clearing in the footage: tall pines, a patch of ferns, and a sloped ridge in the background. He had been there once, years ago. It wasn't far from where Max had found the camera. As Daniel walked, he pointed out oddities: a tree with markings that didn't look natural, a ring of stones too evenly shaped, and a rabbit that bolted at the sound of his footsteps, vanishing like smoke. Jake paused the footage. The markings on the tree, vertical slashes grouped in threes, were the same pattern he'd seen on a boulder near their campsite. He hadn't paid them any mind at the time, assuming they were trailblazes. Now he wasn't so sure. He resumed the video. Daniel continued talking casually, but there was a subtle edge creeping into his voice. "Feels quieter today, not in a peaceful way. More like the silence is watching me." Jake watched as the day unfolded in Daniel's lens. Rays of sun filtered through the branches, Insects buzzed, and the occasional bird call echoed above. Yet despite the natural setting, something in the footage felt wrong. The light seemed too dim, the air too still. Even Daniel, who had started so upbeat, now paused more often, turning his head at faint sounds. By late afternoon, the camera shook as Daniel set it on a rock, adjusting his backpack. "Quick break. Legs are sore, but the view's worth it," he said, aiming the lens at a valley below. A stretch of unbroken forest rippled under the golden sky. But in the corner of the screen, Jake noticed something. A shadow that didn't match the tree line. Tall, narrow, gone in the next frame. Jake rewound. Played it again. Slower. There it was. Not a tree, not an animal, just something. That night over dinner, he tried to mention the footage to Emily. She asked if it was scary. Jake hesitated, then shook his head. Just a hiker's trip. He filmed everything. Got a bit lost, I think. Do you think he found anything cool? Jake forced a smile. Yeah, maybe too cool. Emily shrugged and returned to her mashed potatoes. After she went to bed, Jake resumed watching. The third video ended with Daniel setting up camp beside a stream, muttering about strange noises and how the forest looked different than he remembered. The final few seconds were a close-up of his face, tired, distracted, as if listening for something behind the camera. Jake ejected the memory card, locked it in a drawer and turned off the lights. Something about Daniel's voice lingered in his head, like the echo of a warning he hadn't fully understood. There was more on that card, much more. But Jake wasn't ready to see it all at once. Max stirred in his sleep, growling softly. And outside, beyond the window, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, like they too were listening. The fourth video opened with a burst of morning light. Daniel's face appeared in the lower corner of the screen, framed by the edge of his GoPro's mount. He looked rested, calm and ready. "Day one in the interior," he said, brushing pine needles from his jacket. "Made good distance yesterday. No signs of other hikers, which is kinda awesome. This part of Willow Creek is untouched." He swung the camera around to show the trail ahead. Narrow, uneven, choked with roots and overgrown brush. It wasn't on any official map. Daniel had found it through an old forum thread, now inactive. According to the user who posted it, the trail led to a hidden waterfall, untouched by development, sacred to local tribes. Daniel hiked steadily, commenting on the flora and the terrain. He stopped at one point to examine a tree with a twisted trunk shaped like a corkscrew. "Weird growth patterns out here," he mused. "Never seen anything like this." As the day progressed, the footage took on a more exploratory tone. Daniel found a narrow clearing with a ring of moss-covered stones. He paced around them, intrigued. These look placed, too circular to be random. He knelt beside one, brushing off dirt. No carvings, but they feel old. Maybe a fire pit. Ritual site. He laughed lightly, but didn't linger. The forest around him was growing thicker, darker. The sun, though still high, struggled to pierce the canopy. Later, he came upon a small cascade of water tumbling over rocks, possibly the start of the waterfall he'd read about. He set the camera down to rest, letting it capture the scene. Birds chirped faintly, water rushed, wind brushed against the mic. But then, barely audible beneath it all, whispers. Faint, fleeting. Jake rewound 3 times. There was no mistaking it. Not the wind, not an echo. Words, just 2. "Turn back." The next clip showed Daniel hiking again, but his tone had shifted. "Starting to feel like I'm being watched. I know, classic hiker paranoia, but it's not just a feeling. The birds stopped singing about an hour ago, and I swear I heard something pacing me off trail. Could be a deer. Could be my imagination." He panned the camera toward the underbrush. Nothing moved, but the stillness was suffocating. By late afternoon, Daniel found the waterfall. It wasn't massive, more like a hidden curtain of water falling into a shallow basin, but it was beautiful, untouched. Surreal. He filmed it from every angle, walking slowly along the edge, capturing the shimmer where sunlight caught the spray. That's when he found the carving. A symbol, etched into a flat stone beside the pool, 3 vertical lines crossed by a single horizontal stroke. Jake's stomach twisted when he saw it. It matched the marks on the tree from the earlier video. Daniel crouched beside it, confused. "This definitely isn't natural," he murmured. "Looks recent, not weathered." He didn't know it yet, but that was the point where everything began to shift. Daniel stayed by the waterfall into early evening, setting up camp nearby. He cooked a simple meal, narrated into the camera about his plans to explore further tomorrow, and mentioned hearing voices near the water, but dismissing them as echoes. "They say nature plays tricks on you when you're alone too long," he said, half laughing. "Just gotta keep my head clear." The final shot of the video was Daniel lying in his tent, lit only by the blue glow of his lantern. His eyes didn't close. He stared at the ceiling, the shadows moving across the nylon fabric. A twig snapped outside. He froze. The clip ended. Jake sat frozen in his chair, the cursor blinking on the next video in the list. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. Whatever Daniel had felt that night, it wasn't in his head. And Jake was beginning to understand. This was no ordinary hike. The next file began with the sun already rising. Daniel's tent was unzipped halfway, and the camera shook as he emerged, bleary-eyed and silent. No cheerful commentary this time, just wind, birds returning to song, and the soft crunch of his boots on damp earth. His voice came a minute later, low, tense. "I didn't sleep. Something or someone was outside the tent all night. I didn't see anything, but I heard it. Slow steps, breathing, sometimes scratching. I stayed still. I didn't even turn the light on." He paused to scan the tree line. "There are marks on the outside of my tent." The camera cut to close-ups, long arched scratches running down the side of the nylon fabric. Not animal marks. Too deliberate, too high off the ground. Daniel didn't theorize. He didn't joke. He just packed his gear quickly, glancing around between every movement. Back on the trail, the tone had shifted completely. Gone was the explorer's excitement. He moved with purpose, not curiosity, and checked over his shoulder often. His breathing was louder now, shallow, cautious. An hour into the hike, he stopped near a bend in the trail and crouched. "There's something here," he whispered. "Bones." The camera zoomed in on what remained of a small animal. Maybe a fox. It was hard to tell. The body had been stripped clean, but not by scavengers. No bite marks, no signs of dragging. Just clean separation, placed deliberately on a bed of moss. He stood quickly and kept moving. Later, he reached a fork in the trail. His GPS showed nothing, and his compass spun slowly, never settling. He tapped it, shook it, then cursed under his breath. "This doesn't make sense. I didn't go that far yesterday. I should have circled back near the old creek bed by now." He tried the left path first, walked for 20 minutes. The forest only grew darker, denser. The underbrush swallowed the trail. When he turned back, the way behind him was different. Trees he didn't recognize, stones arranged in unfamiliar shapes. He doubled back, filming every turn. At one point, the camera picked up a sudden movement in the distance, a blur of grey behind two trees. Daniel saw it too. He stopped walking and zoomed in. Nothing there. Then came the sound, a low groan, somewhere between a breath and a growl. Deep, vibrating through the air, not human, not animal. Daniel ran. The footage shook violently for nearly a minute. Branches snapped, his breath heaved. The sound followed, always just behind. Finally, he stopped near a rock formation and collapsed beside it, chest heaving. "I don't know what that was," he gasped. "It followed me. I didn't imagine it." He panned the camera slowly. Nothing moved. But the silence was complete now. No birds, no insects. Just the occasional creak of trees in the wind. That night, the video resumed with Daniel in his tent again, though this time he had stacked rocks in a circle around the perimeter. "I don't know if this will help," he said, adjusting the lens toward the opening, "but I read once that circles confuse predators. Keeps them from approaching." His voice cracked slightly. "I haven't seen the sun all afternoon. The trees are thicker now. And the trail, I swear it changes. Like it moves when I'm not looking." He sat still for a moment, then turned the camera to his face. "I thought I came out here to find peace," he whispered, "but I think I've walked into something ancient. Something that doesn't want to be found." He turned off the camera. Jake stared at the frozen frame of Daniel's face. The fear wasn't subtle anymore. It had taken root, grown. He looked like a man already half lost. Jake's hand hovered over the next file, his mind racing. The story unfolding wasn't just strange, it was intentional. Every detail, every step deeper into those woods, felt less like chance and more like a design, and someone or something was guiding it. The sixth video began without any introduction. Daniel was pacing. The camera, strapped to his chest again, caught only fragments. His boots in motion, the dirt path beneath him. his shadow stretching and snapping with each anxious turn. His breathing filled the audio, rapid and uneven. "I made a mark," he muttered. "Right here, I know I did." He stopped in front of a tree and pointed to its base. 3 slashes, clear as day. "I carved them this morning, but they're not here now. There's nothing." His voice shook. "I'm not imagining this. I'm not crazy." Jake leaned forward. This was new. Daniel, once articulate and observant, now stumbled over his words, his thoughts tripping over themselves like tangled roots. Daniel turned the camera toward a clearing. "That boulder. I've passed it 3 times. I'm going in circles, but I'm not turning. The forest is changing, shifting behind me." He fell silent again except for the occasional gasp or exhale. The next segment showed him stacking small stones on a tree stump, arranging them carefully. "These are my markers," he explained. "I'll film each one. I'll follow them back. I need to outsmart it." Then came a cut. The video resumed nearly an hour later. The lighting had changed, darker, muddier, rain clouds, twilight, hard to say. Daniel stood in front of the same stump. The stones were gone. "I didn't move them, I didn't touch them." He backed away slowly. It knows. What it was, he didn't say, but his mind was slipping toward something deeper than fear, toward conviction. The certainty that something unseen had begun to manipulate his surroundings. He talked more in the next clip, rambling, less coherent. "Noise, not just rustling. It mimics things. Voices I know. Last night I heard my sister call my name. She died in 2012. I know what I heard." The camera shook. His hands trembled as he adjusted the lens. "I saw a person. I swear it was someone. Pale, standing between 2 trees. But they didn't move. Not once. I looked away, looked back. They were gone." Jake paused. He rewound 10 seconds. Played it again. And yes, in the left edge of the frame, half obscured by a branch, a human shape. Still, white, slightly too tall. The next moment, it was gone. Daniel didn't mention it again, as if even acknowledging it might summon it closer. By that evening, he'd constructed another circle of stones, larger this time. Inside it, he lit a small fire and whispered under his breath. Not prayer, not panic, just repetition. Circles confuse predators. Circles confuse predators. Circles confuse predators. The video faded briefly, then resumed with Daniel inside his tent, the camera mounted to the ceiling. He stared at the screen without speaking, eyes glassy. Minutes passed with only the soft patter of rain on nylon and the distant groan of bending trees. Then, softly, from outside, a single knock. Not on the tent, not on a tree, but a knock, solid, deliberate, human. Daniel flinched. He didn't move, didn't speak. His eyes darted back and forth. The knock came again, slower, closer, then silence. The video ended there. Jake sat in darkness, the only light coming from the paused frame on his laptop. He couldn't move either, not at first. Something in him, something primal, was recoiling. Not from what Daniel had seen, but from what he hadn't. Whatever was out there wasn't hunting him. It was playing with him, warping the boundaries of space, time, memory. And Daniel was unraveling. Jake reached for the next video file, his finger hovering over the mousepad, but his eyes drifted to Max, sleeping by the door. The dog stirred suddenly, ears flicking, tail stiff. Jake froze. Outside, in the distance, something knocked. Jake didn't sleep that night, not really. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The echo of that knock, real or imagined, lodged deep in his chest. Max had returned to sleep eventually, curling near the fireplace, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. By morning, he was already at his desk, the footage cued, ready. He didn't press play, not yet. Instead, he opened his browser and typed in the name Daniel Rowe. It didn't take long. A local article 5 years old. Headline: Hiker disappears in Willow Creek Wilderness. Jake clicked it. Daniel had been 28, a travel blogger with a growing following. According to the article, he had planned a 4-day solo backpacking trip and failed to check in afterward. Search parties combed the trails for weeks. No gear was found, no campsite, no body. Eventually, the case went cold. Authorities assumed he'd gotten lost or injured, but the forest offered no closure. Jake's eyes scanned every detail. The map of Daniel's intended route aligned eerily with where Max had dug up the GoPro. No doubt about it. It was the same man. The man whose face Jake had watched slowly change from confident to broken. There was no mention of a camera being recovered. Jake leaned back, heart thudding. He had something no one else had seen, a digital breadcrumb trail, buried for 5 years. That afternoon, Emily returned from school talking about her science project. Jake tried to focus, but his mind kept drifting. She noticed. "You okay, Dad? You're doing the staring thing again." He blinked. "Just tired." "You had another bad dream?" Jake paused. "I didn't sleep enough to dream." Emily tilted her head. "Max kept growling last night. I heard him. Was someone outside?" Jake forced a smile. "Probably a raccoon." She didn't look convinced. That evening after dinner, Jake returned to his laptop. He watched 3 more clips, each more fragmented than the last. Daniel's voice cracked when he spoke. He referred to things off camera. He mentioned paths that vanished after he walked them, trees that looked alive, symbols that changed shape. Emily walked in halfway through a clip and stopped cold. "Who's that?" Jake minimized the video. "Just some hiking footage." Emily frowned. "That place looks like the spot where we found the camera." Jake nodded slowly. "It is." Her voice softened. "Is he okay?" Jake didn't answer. That night, Emily woke up screaming. Jake rushed into her room, heart pounding. She was sitting upright, shaking, her eyes wide. "There was something in the woods," she whispered, "looking through the window, tall, pale." Jake hugged her tight. "It was just a dream." She didn't reply. Over the next few days, Jake became consumed. He printed frames from the footage, taped maps to the walls, scribbled notes and time codes. The more he watched, the more he noticed. Patterns. Not just in Daniel's route, but in the forest itself. Trees arranged in geometric clusters. Stones forming shapes that shouldn't exist in nature. And always the same symbol, reappearing. 3 vertical lines, 1 horizontal. It wasn't just random, it was ritualistic, intentional. He dug deeper, searching through forums, old archives, obscure blogs. He found mentions of similar symbols in Native American lore. Tribes spoke of spirit paths, routes that weren't walked but revealed. Places where the forest remembered, where it tested those who entered. They called it the silent stretch. Not all who walked it returned, and some who did weren't quite the same. Jake read testimonies, hikers describing getting lost on trails that didn't exist, seeing things that shouldn't be there, hearing their own names whispered from the trees. He found one blog, long abandoned, with a chilling final entry. "If you see the stones move, it's too late." Jake sat back, rubbing his face. The footage wasn't just a mystery, it was a warning. And somehow, through Max's discovery, that warning had landed in his hands. But it wasn't just the footage anymore. It was starting to bleed into his life, into Emily's dreams, into the corners of his home. And something inside him whispered that he hadn't watched the most important part yet. Jake sat at the edge of his bed, papers spread across the floor like the shattered pieces of a map only he could read. The more he dug, the more undeniable it became. Daniel's experience wasn't an isolated case. Others had walked into Willow Creek and vanished. Quiet disappearances, rarely publicized, swallowed by time and silence. He compiled a list, 12 names, spanning nearly 40 years. Hikers, campers, surveyors, no remains, no equipment found. In most cases, the last known location was somewhere near the Western Ridge, close to where Max had dug up the GoPro. Every name carried a strange footnote. Witnesses describing odd behavior in the days before they vanished. One woman said her husband became obsessed with patterns in the moss. Another man left a journal behind, scribbled with the same 3-line symbol over and over. Jake found one archived police report from 1993, where the deputy noted, "A formation of stones arranged deliberately at the missing person's last campsite. No known animals could have done it." Jake's obsession sharpened into purpose. He drove into town the next morning, stopping by the small local library. The building was quiet, mostly empty. He asked the clerk about historical records, land use reports, anything connected to Willow Creek's past. "You'll want Martha Delling," the clerk said, pointing toward the back. "She volunteers in archives. Knows more about this town than the town does." Jake found her hunched over a yellowed map, magnifying glass in hand. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed, her voice lined with years. "I'm looking for information about disappearances in the forest," Jake said. She glanced at him. "You're not the first." He explained what he'd found. The GoPro, the footage, the names. He expected skepticism, but she nodded slowly. "I've seen that symbol," she said before he even showed it. 3 vertical, 1 horizontal. It predates this town. Jake leaned in. "What is it?" "Boundary marker," she whispered. "Old tribes used it to warn each other. It marked a kind of spiritual perimeter, a place that didn't belong to the living." She unfolded a hand-drawn map, older than the one Jake had seen online. It showed parts of the forest no longer listed, with handwritten annotations: Whispering Stones, the Silent Row, Split-Eye Pool. "This was sacred land," Martha continued, "but not in the way you think. It wasn't protected, it was quarantined. They believed something ancient lived there, not a spirit, not a god. Something waiting, feeding off memory and fear." Jake's skin prickled. "And people kept going in?" "Curiosity always wins," she said, "until it doesn't." He hesitated. "Have you ever seen it?" She looked him dead in the eyes. "I've heard it." Jake asked if she would go back with him. Her answer was immediate. "No. I'm too old to be hunted." That word stuck with him. Hunted. Before he left, she handed him a photocopy of a journal entry from 1914. A fur trapper had wandered into the forest, describing glowing stones and voices calling from nowhere. His last line was underlined in red ink. "The path does not curve. The path folds." Jake drove home in silence, the trees blurring past the window like watchers too slow to catch him. At home, Emily was sketching at the table. When he looked, his stomach turned. She had drawn the symbol. Exactly. Same proportions. Same spacing. "Where'd you see that?" he asked, trying to sound calm. Emily shrugged. "Nowhere. I just thought it looked interesting." He didn't push. Not yet. That night, Jake stood on his porch, staring into the darkness beyond the tree line. The wind moved gently through the leaves, carrying something cold with it. The pattern was real, and something, somewhere out there, was waiting for him to see it. Jake didn't speak much the next morning. He packed deliberately: water, food, flashlight, backup batteries, compass, first aid, and the GoPro. He loaded his old hiking bag with quiet resolve, the kind born not from confidence but necessity. Emily stood at the door, arms crossed. "You're going back, aren't you?" Jake nodded. "I'm coming." "No," he said firmly. "It's not safe." She didn't argue further. She just hugged him tightly, then whispered, "Don't listen if it calls you." That made him stop. "What?" "I dreamed about it again," she murmured. "It said your name this time." Jake's heart dropped, but he kissed the top of her head. "Stay with Max. I'll be back tonight." He wasn't sure if it was a promise or a hope. He drove until the road narrowed into gravel, then hiked the last mile to the campsite where Max had found the camera. Every tree, every stone now felt loaded with memory. He found the old oak easily, the roots where Max had dug still loose. From there he followed Daniel's likely path, relying on what he'd memorized from the footage. The deeper he walked, the quieter the world became. The wind hushed. The birds fell silent. Even the leaves beneath his boots seemed reluctant to crunch. After 2 hours, he reached it, the ring of stones Daniel had filmed near the hidden waterfall. Time hadn't touched them. They stood arranged exactly as before. Jake circled them, camera in hand, trying to recreate Daniel's angles. Then he spotted it, a weathered strap half buried in moss. He pulled gently. A backpack, rotted and torn. Inside were fragments of a journal, a dented thermos and a name tag stitched to the inner lining. Daniel Rowe. Jake exhaled slowly. There was no body. But this was no longer just a theory. Daniel had died here, or disappeared into something that didn't leave remains. He moved carefully toward the next marker, a flat stone beside the shallow pool still etched with the same symbol. Its lines were cleaner now, almost fresh. The forest darkened suddenly, clouds eclipsing the sun. A chill rolled through the trees. Jake stepped back instinctively. Then came the sound. Wind at first, but layered with something else. A voice. Faint. Distant. "Jake." He froze. The whisper came again, but it wasn't behind him. It came from the trees ahead, filtered through layers of bark and shadow. He turned on the camera and pressed record. "Say it again," he whispered. Silence. Then, further in the woods, movement. He raised the camera, zoomed in. Between the trees stood the silhouette of a structure, something crude, maybe stone or wood, covered in moss. Part altar, part monument. It matched nothing he'd seen in the footage, but it radiated that same wrongness. He approached cautiously. The ground felt spongy, unnatural. Every step sank deeper than expected. Then thunder, a sudden rolling growl from the sky. Rain began in seconds, drenching the forest in sheets. Jake ducked beneath a rocky outcrop, shielding the camera. The forest groaned with the storm, trees bending low, branches cracking in protest. But the structure remained still, unmoving, watching. After 20 minutes, the rain slowed. Jake stepped out, soaked but unharmed. He turned back toward the trail, only to find it gone. Trees blocked the path. Stones had shifted. The forest had reassembled itself. Panic flared, but before he could spiral, something shimmered ahead. A faint blue glow weaving between trunks. Not lightning, not fire. He followed it. The light guided him with impossible certainty, illuminating roots before he stepped, parting brush just in time. Within minutes, he was back at the old oak. The glow vanished. Jake stood there, heart pounding, soaked to the bone, unsure whether he'd just been led out or warned. Behind him, the forest returned to silence. Jake didn't speak the entire drive home. His clothes clung damp to his skin, mud streaked across his arms, and the forest still echoed behind his eyes. He didn't feel fear exactly. It was something older, something deeper. When he arrived, Emily ran to him, eyes wide. "You saw it, didn't you?" Jake nodded, unable to form a proper answer. He showered, changed, and sat at his desk. The footage from his trip uploaded slowly, but he watched every frame. The camera had captured more than he remembered. The altar, the storm, and then something else. In the video, just before the rain began, Jake's camera caught movement near the edge of the frame. A figure, barely visible, standing among the trees, too far to identify, too still to be animal. It didn't flinch in the storm. It didn't blink. He rewound, paused, zoomed. Its head was tilted slightly to the side, as if listening. That night, Max refused to leave Emily's room. The dog growled at the window twice before Jake closed the curtains. There were no knocks, no whispers, but the house felt altered, like it carried the weight of something recently returned. Jake sat up late, frame by frame, analyzing the footage. He slowed the clip where the glowing blue light led him from the woods. At one point, the camera panned upward, accidentally perhaps, and for a brief second, the trees above twisted into a shape, a circle, the same circle Daniel had made with stones. Only this one was vast, woven into the canopy by bent branches. It was deliberate, a symbol too large to notice from the ground. Jake paused it there. He didn't understand what it meant, but something inside him whispered that it wasn't meant for him to understand, only to follow. He kept watching until his camera cut to black, but the last file didn't end where he expected. As Jake stood over the altar in the final seconds, there was a faint hum in the background, barely audible but present, and then a voice, low and slow. "Don't leave it behind." He played it again. Same words, same tone. "Don't leave it behind." The camera had captured it, clear as a bell, but Jake remembered hearing nothing. He stepped away from the laptop, every hair on his neck rising. Was the voice warning him or commanding him? Later that night, the lights in the house dimmed briefly. The TV turned on by itself, static white noise hissing into the silence. Emily screamed from her room. Jake rushed in. She was on the floor, pale, breathing fast. "I saw Daniel," she gasped. "He was standing next to my bed, but it wasn't really him." Jake pulled her close. You're safe, you're safe." But he wasn't sure anymore. He checked the house top to bottom. Every door was locked, every window secure. Yet when he returned to the living room, he saw something new. Near the fireplace, placed neatly on the hearth, was a stone. Not from their property, not local. It was smooth, oval-shaped, and carved with the same three-line symbol. The same one from Daniel's footage, the same one Emily had drawn. Jake didn't touch it. He placed it in a sealed metal box, locked it in the garage, and sat back at his desk. The footage, the whisper, the stone. He understood now. He hadn't escaped the forest. He'd brought a piece of it back, and something had followed it. That night, Jake dreamed of the altar. This time it glowed red. Emily stood beside it, barefoot, eyes closed. And Daniel knelt on the other side, whispering a phrase over and over. "You've seen too much." Jake woke in a cold sweat, Max barking wildly at the door. He got up, trembling. Outside, across the lawn, stood a figure, still, watching. Then it vanished. Emily collapsed the next morning. Jake found her curled on the hallway floor, shivering, her skin clammy and pale. She couldn't form words, only soft murmurs, fragments of thoughts. Her eyes were open but unfocused, as if looking through layers Jake couldn't see. He rushed her to the hospital. The doctors ran every test. Blood work, scans, reflexes. Everything came back normal. No infections, no trauma. But Emily remained distant, as if caught between dreaming and waking. "She's in some kind of acute exhaustion state," one nurse told Jake. "Almost like she hasn't rested in days." Jake didn't tell them about the stone. He didn't tell them about the whisper. He sat beside her bed, gripping her hand, whispering stories from when she was little. He told her she was strong, that Max was waiting for her, that she'd come back. But his voice trembled. When he returned home that evening, the house was cold. Not in temperature, something deeper. He walked through each room, checking lights, windows, closets, everything in place, nothing disturbed. But something was wrong. Jake powered on his laptop. He needed to confirm, to know that he hadn't imagined what he'd captured. He opened the footage from the altar again, the one with the whisper. Only now the file wouldn't play. Corrupted. He checked the others. One by one, the same error. File cannot be opened. Dozens of videos. Gone. Only one file remained, oddly renamed, "Keep It Out." Jake stared at the title, his hand frozen above the mouse. When he finally opened it, the screen filled with static for several seconds, then cut to footage that wasn't his. It was Daniel again, but different. He stood in the middle of the forest, shirt torn, eyes wide. The camera was close, almost too close, and his voice was desperate. "They lied," he said. "The forest doesn't trap you. It marks you. It lets you leave. But not alone." He stepped back, revealing his face more clearly. Jake recoiled. Daniel's eyes were completely black. Not from shadow. His irises, his pupils, all ink. Something inside him had taken root. "Whatever watches from that place," he whispered, "it learns from you. It waits. And once you see it, it sees everything." The video ended with a burst of static. Jake slammed the laptop shut, bile rising in his throat. He knew what he had to do. That night he received a call. Not from the hospital. Not from a number he recognized. "Martha Delling," said the voice on the other end. Jake froze. "I told you not to go back," she said. "But you did. How did you? You weren't supposed to bring it home. I didn't mean to." She was silent for a beat. "It followed you because you saw it. That's all it needs." Jake looked at the locked garage door. "The stone? It's not just a marker. It's a key." He felt dizzy. "A key to what?" "To its way in." Jake gripped the phone. "How do I stop it?" "You don't," she said simply. "But you might be able to close the door, if you return what was taken." Jake stared at the box. "But hurry," she added. "The longer it stays near the living, the more it learns to wear your shape." He hung up. That night Max howled at the door again. Jake didn't go to the window. He already knew what he'd see. Emily's shape, too still, standing beneath the tree line, smiling without warmth. The next morning, Jake awoke to find Max pacing near the front door, tail rigid, ears alert. The dog had scratched deep grooves into the hardwood overnight. His water bowl remained untouched, his food ignored. He wouldn't leave the doorway, not even to follow Jake into the kitchen. Something was outside. The house itself felt different. Lights flickered, not from faulty wiring, but as if the electricity pulsed with hesitation. Jake's phone was dead. The clocks had all stopped at 3:17 a.m., the exact moment he'd heard the whisper again through the vents. Emily remained unconscious at the hospital. Nurses said her vitals were stable, but her mind had retreated, her body refusing to wake. Jake sat beside her each evening, watching her chest rise and fall, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. Back home, strange things began to appear. On the kitchen counter one morning, a pine cone, still wet with dew, freshly fallen. Inside his closet, a patch of moss. Beneath the bed, a single feather from a bird Jake couldn't identify. Each item smelled faintly of the forest, damp, ancient, as if the woods were unraveling into his home, one thread at a time. Max barked violently that night, teeth bared toward the hallway. Jake rushed out, heart pounding, to find every drawer in the house open, every door ajar. The air was icy. On the living room wall scrawled in mud. 3 vertical lines, 1 horizontal. Jake scrubbed it off with shaking hands. He checked the garage. The box was still sealed, the stone untouched. But now it hummed. He could hear it, not with his ears, but in his teeth, his skull. his spine, a deep vibration, like a distant drumbeat echoing through his bones. He couldn't ignore it anymore. Emily's sketchbook lay on her bed, half buried beneath a blanket. He hadn't seen it in days. Curious, he opened it. Every page was filled, not with drawings, but with symbols. The same one, over and over, sometimes huge and centered, sometimes hidden in corners, sometimes in patterns that repeated endlessly. And then a new one Jake hadn't seen before. Two circles side by side with a jagged line between them. He stared at it, the shape pulling at something buried in his mind. Then he remembered. The canopy. That shot from his footage. The trees bent into a circle. This was the same. Except now there were two. Gateways. The stone wasn't just a key. It was one half of something waiting to be completed. That night, as Jake tried to sleep, he heard it again. The whisper. Not through the vents this time, but from Emily's room. He rushed in. Her body remained still, but her mouth moved. Only two words. Bring it. Jake backed out, blood draining from his face. Then came the static. The television blared to life without warning. The screen flickered, not with channels, but images. The altar. The forest. Daniel's face. Jake's own backyard. A blur of symbols. Then Emily's face, pale and expressionless, blinking in slow motion. Jake pulled the plug. The screen went dark. The whisper didn't stop. He turned, and on the hallway floor lay another stone, identical to the one in the garage, same size, same symbol, but this one was warm. Jake picked it up without meaning to, his hand moving as if on its own. It pulsed once, just once, and he understood. He had until the next moonrise. If he didn't return it by then, the second gate would open, and it wouldn't just be whispers crossing through. Jake left before dawn. The box containing the stone sat on the passenger seat, bound tightly with chains and wrapped in heavy cloth. Max whined quietly as Jake closed the front door, not understanding but sensing enough to worry. Emily remained in the hospital, still unresponsive, but stable, floating somewhere Jake could no longer reach. The forest greeted him in silence. No birds, no breeze. Just that still, thick air that settled over Willow Creek when it didn't want to be disturbed. He parked at the end of the logging road, the same spot as before, and began walking. Each step felt heavier. The trail, once winding and uncertain, now opened with strange clarity. Trees shifted, parting for him. The path guided him, not in a linear way, but as if responding to his presence, like it had been waiting. The altar wasn't hard to find. It rose from the earth in a shape both ancient and deliberate, stone blocks layered in unnatural angles, covered in moss but unbroken. Around it, the trees leaned slightly inward, forming a crooked circle overhead, a perfect mirror of the symbol Emily had drawn. Jake stepped into the clearing, the box cradled in his arms. He stopped before the altar, heart pounding. Then he heard it, footsteps behind him. He turned slowly. Daniel stood at the edge of the trees, but it wasn't Daniel, not really. His body looked the same, clothes tattered, skin pale, but his eyes, black, bottomless. They reflected no light, no life. He didn't blink. Jake didn't speak. He just placed the box on the altar. Daniel tilted his head. "Why now?" The voice came, not from his mouth, but from the trees, the earth, the air itself. It was everywhere at once. Jake steadied his breath. "Because I brought it back." The wind rose sharply, swirling around him. Leaves danced in violent circles. The stone inside the box vibrated, its hum now audible in the open air. Daniel stepped forward. "It's already opened." Jake looked at the sky. The sun had reached its apex. "Then why am I still here?" A pause. "Because it isn't finished." Jake opened the box. The stone was glowing now, pale blue light pulsing from within, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. He lifted it carefully, placing it at the center of the altar. The hum stopped. The wind died instantly. Silence. Then the forest exhaled. It was the only way Jake could describe it. A collective breath, as if thousands of lungs hidden beneath bark and root released all at once. The light from the stone expanded outward, forming a ring of energy that rippled across the altar, then faded. Daniel smiled and vanished. No sound, no scream, just gone, like a switch turned off. The clearing returned to stillness. Jake stepped back, unsure if it was over or just beginning. Behind him, something moved. He turned, expecting more shadows, more illusions, but instead he saw her. Emily. She stood barefoot on the edge of the circle, eyes wide with confusion. "Dad?" Jake ran to her, grabbing her shoulders, checking her face, her pulse, everything. She was warm, awake, herself. "How did you—" "I don't know," she whispered. "I just opened my eyes and I was here." Jake looked around. The forest, though still eerie, no longer pressed in. The trees stood still. The silence, though unnatural, was no longer threatening. He took Emily's hand. They walked out together. No lights guided them this time. They didn't need them. Something had accepted the return. Or perhaps decided it wasn't worth the fight. As they left the clearing behind, Jake didn't look back. Whatever lived in those woods wasn't his to understand. But he had returned what was taken. And for now, that was enough. The forest didn't chase them. Jake expected it to. He expected branches to close in, for whispers to fill the air again, for shadows to stretch toward their feet. But none of that happened. The woods let them go. They reached the car by dusk, the sky painted in burnt orange and soft grey. Jake opened the passenger door, helping Emily inside. She was quiet but alert, eyes scanning the trees, trying to make sense of how she'd gotten there. He didn't press her. She'd speak when she was ready. The drive back was silent, save for the steady hum of tires against asphalt. Jake's hands gripped the wheel tightly, every muscle in his body tense with the expectation of something, anything, appearing behind them. But nothing did. When they reached home, Max was waiting on the porch, tail wagging slowly, ears pricked. He approached cautiously, sniffed Emily, then leaned against her leg and sighed. Jake felt something loosen in his chest. Inside, the house was as they'd left it. No more pine cones, no more moss, no more symbols. Jake checked the garage. The second stone was gone. Only the chains and the empty box remained. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in the living room watching the dark windows, waiting for the flicker of movement, the static hum, the low whisper that had haunted every corner of his mind for weeks. But it didn't come. Emily slept soundly in her room. Max snored quietly at the foot of her bed. The next morning she joined Jake on the porch, 2 mugs of hot chocolate in hand. She sat beside him, legs tucked up beneath her. "I remember the dream," she said softly. Jake turned to her. "I was walking in the forest, but it wasn't scary. It was quiet, like it wanted to show me something." "What did it show you?" She shrugged. "A place, like a cave but made of trees, and there was someone there sitting with their back to me." Jake didn't speak. Emily continued. "I thought it was you, but when they turned around it was me, older." She looked up at him. She said, "We keep what we carry, and we carry what we see. What does that mean?" Jake took a long breath. "It means we never leave things behind completely. We carry memories, and sometimes they carry us." Emily nodded slowly. "Then I think it's okay now." Jake hoped she was right. Later that week, he checked his laptop again. Every file from Daniel's GoPro was gone. Not corrupted, erased, even the backups. His computer's memory showed no trace, as if it had never existed. He checked the camera itself. It powered on, but was completely empty. No logs, no data, just a single message on the screen. "Not yours to keep." Jake didn't try to recover it. He knew now some truths weren't meant to be recorded. The newspaper ran a short piece. "Local girl found after mysterious disappearance." The article glossed over details. No mention of the forest, no mention of Daniel Rowe. Jake was fine with that. Some stories needed to fade quietly. Still, he kept the stone box, not as a trophy but as a reminder. It sat empty in his office closet, locked away. Every now and then he'd check it, and every time it was just a box. Emily stopped drawing the symbols. Max never went near the woods again. And Jake, for all his questions, accepted that there would be no answers, only the understanding that the forest had rules older than language, and sometimes it offered mercy. Sometimes. Jake stood at the edge of the yard, staring toward the tree line. It was early morning, the sky just starting to turn, casting everything in shades of blue and silver. The woods were still, motionless, as if sleeping. He hadn't stepped back into them since that day, and he didn't plan to. Some places didn't want to be understood. They didn't need explorers, investigators, or closure. They just needed to be left alone. Max lay in the grass nearby, head resting on his paws, eyes fixed on the same trees. He didn't bark, he didn't growl, but he never let Emily walk near them again, not even by accident. Inside the house, life resumed its rhythm. Emily returned to school. She didn't talk much about what happened. Occasionally she would pause during quiet moments, staring out a window as if listening for something distant. But the fear had left her. She laughed again. She ran. She danced barefoot in the kitchen when her favorite songs played. Jake watched her with a mixture of joy and awe. She had made it out. They both had. And yet, a part of the forest still lingered, not as a threat but as a shadow stitched into the corners of memory. He thought of Daniel often, not just the footage, but the man, a wanderer, a storyteller, someone looking for peace in a place that had only ever known silence. Jake had once believed stories were meant to be captured, archived, shared, but now he knew better. Some stories protected themselves. Some truths refused to be held. One evening, Jake walked into his office and found something resting on his desk, a pine needle. Just one. He didn't touch it. He just looked at it, nodded once, and turned off the light. Sometimes acknowledgement was enough. Weeks later, he found an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photo printed from film, faded but clear. It showed the altar from a different angle, one he hadn't seen or taken. In the background, almost hidden in the trees, stood Daniel, smiling. Jake placed the photo in a drawer and never showed it to anyone. He knew what it meant. The circle had closed, but part of him would always remain within it. And part of it, whatever it truly was, had left its mark on him. So if you ever find yourself deep in the woods, and you stumble across a stone with strange markings, or a trail that seems older than the map you hold, turn back. Not because you'll get lost, but because you might find something that doesn't want to be found, something that waits for those curious enough to open the wrong door. And if you hear a voice whisper your name in the quiet, even when no one is around, don't answer, because the forest remembers. It always remembers. If you found this story as haunting and unbelievable as we did, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true tales that walk the line between reality and the unknown. Every week we uncover the hidden, the lost, and the unforgettable. And if you're still with us, still wondering what came next, click the video on your screen now to explore another mystery that might just change the way you see the world around you. Some paths, once seen, can never be unseen.